All right, guys, how are we doing today? Hope you're doing well. So today I'm going to be talking about, as you can see in the picture, animals. As someone that's had many pets throughout my life, and having taken care of pets as well, other people's pets at times, temporarily anyway, I've always kind of had a bit of a strong connection with cats and dogs in particular, but really just animals in general, really. Um, And one thing that's always bothered me is like really bothered me is animal cruelty, animal neglect, and and I've always kind of just felt really full of rage whenever I see like new stuff, like things on Facebook or things in just in general news about people neglecting animals, animals being abused, or animal cruelty, whether it's with pets, whether it's in on farms, in sports, whatever it might be. And I just always like just felt kind of like really just anytime I ever see anything like that, it just really it just fills me with rage, quite frankly. It just fills me with a level of anger that's uh that's just it's just utter. I don't know really how to describe it. Just utter just contempt, I guess. Just utter just disgust at the whole thing, and just how much suffering and just how much like unnecessary like cruelty and suffering goes on out there in the world. It's just the lack of like fairness and like justice for animals. And just how little how little powers like most of the animal protection services, certainly in the UK anyway, really have. Um, and so in this video, I'm going to be outlining if I was in a position where I could do something to enable animals to have a much better chance of avoiding this kind of thing, or at least dealing with those who commit these types of crimes. You know, I'm going to outline some of the things that I would try to do if I had the ability to, whether that was being in an MP or a councillor or just in government or in some sense or somehow could or some kind of if I had the ability to um sort of help maybe somehow maybe in the future maybe I could raise money for the RSPCA, the PDSA, or smaller animal charities and things like that. So it was something I'd quite like to do. I would really probably at some point quite like to do something to try and advocate for stricter rules and more powers for these organisations, and probably for the police. Actually, I think if not these organisations themselves, then I think the police should be given new powers. I think to deal with these kind of things. You know, I've had many wonderful years with as a child. We had a dog called Ben. It was a Labrador. It was a lovely dog. Um, and After Ben, then we had a cat called Snoopy, and then Snoopy sadly passed away. I think it was in 2007, 2008. I think he had don't know if it was cancer or something like that. I think, and then we had another cat called Charlie, and he passed away. I think it was in 2012. I think 2013 maybe from an overactive thyroid, if I'm not mistaken. And since, well, I don't know, I can't remember how many years afterwards, but there was a time where we didn't have any pets for a while, and then I think it was maybe it was I can't remember exactly, but there was a time when we there was another there was we had we I said we my parents I mean Obviously, I was an adult by the time the last cat we still have now, Olivia, came into the picture. Um, I already moved over here to Thailand, or just about anyway, just about to, I think. So yeah, we've had a few cats, and I've got two dogs of my own now. I've got a Pomeranian, and I've got a Japanese Spitz. Say I have, and me and my wife have. Um, and yeah, I've just always loved animals. I just every time I see a cat or a dog, I'm just always, as long as they're not. Well, as I said, I like dogs, but they can, you've got to be a bit more cautious with dogs. Certainly, stray dogs, or what they call soy dogs or street dogs here, you've got to be a bit more cautious with them. Some of them do have rabies, unfortunately, so you do have to be very careful there. But people's pets, let's say, I just they always just like, every time I see a cat or a dog in someone's house, I always feel like this sort of sense of warmth really. That I always like to you know just sort of play with them and like stroke the fur, and like maybe if they've got some toys, to play with some of the toys or things like that. It's a bit, maybe it's a child in me or something. I don't know, but I've always just like really felt very close to animals. It's not because I'm anti-human or anything, but it's just that I think there's a real sense of loyalty from animals that I think that you don't really fully get from people. And there's a real sense of bond, of a real sense of bonding and loyalty, and real warmth and love, and um, just a real sense that they really do care about you, that they really do, they really do value you as their owner. They really, I think they look up to you, and they really do value you. And I'm going to get onto my recommendations, as it were, in a second. But I just want to make another point here. I think a lot of veterinarians, um, is that the right word? Vets. Um, they don't get. I don't think they often get the credit they deserve. Um, the level of stress, pressure, psychological and emotional toll of having to, excuse me, deal with all that burden of all the things that they have to see it in day out. Um, they have my utmost respect, because it must be extremely demanding, and having to see animals, elderly animals, obviously animals that are in the last stages of their life, because of aging or disease, or maybe some form of cancer, or just organ damage for some reason or other, whether natural or whether it's caused by cruelty or abuse, or maybe an accident as well. Obviously, a lot of cats and dogs get into accidents, car accidents, or just get stuck in places and things like that. Falling off things, getting into fights with other animals, etc., or maybe issues because of ticks or parasites and things like that. So, you know, I absolutely just salute to those people, because it must be very difficult. It must be very difficult, um, burden to carry all the time, especially when you are in a position where you have to, um, you have to put animals down because of, um, basically issues that can't be resolved. You know, because it's better. It's better to be. Sometimes it's as they say, it's better to be cruel. Sometimes you've got to be cruel to be kind of a thing. Um, and yeah, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine having to deal with that all the time. imagine having going home, realise that you've had to put down, say, I don't know, maybe two cats, I don't know, two, three dogs that day, or whatever it might be. I don't know, a rabbit, maybe a pet. Um, yeah, I don't know, a gerbil, a rabbit, maybe a bird, maybe whatever it might be. Maybe a horse, maybe a farm animal of some sort. Um, and just dealing with all like just all the just dealing with all that unnecessary cruelty, just the cruelty and the abuse that they must see all the time. It must be extremely distressing, and I just it can't be an easy career. Yes, they do get paid very well, but I think they very much deserve it, and probably don't get paid enough. Um, and yeah, I just feel sorry for them really, and the staff, in the RSPCA, the PDSA, because it can't be an easy thing to take home, because at work, you have to be professional, but to think that these people don't take home the things that they see and they've had to do every day, is, I think, to be naive. I think these people are human beings and they do have feelings, and there is a point, I'm sure, that where things start to take their toll on them, just as it does in hospitals, just as it does for nurses and doctors, surgery specialists and whatever. So I really do feel for those people, and I have, as I've said, the absolute utmost respect for them, because these people are some of the most compassionate, ethical, morally driven people, I would say. And while they sometimes, yes, mistakes do happen, and um, people are only human after all. But I think, generally speaking, they do try their damn hardest to try and save as many animals as they can. And unfortunately, they can't save everything. So euthanasia, unfortunately, sometimes is necessary. And I say that as someone that's had to see two of my previous cats put down, and yeah, it's very upsetting. It's very, very upsetting. And one of my dogs recently was, and the reason I'm saying this here actually is because one of my dogs, as I mentioned, I have a Japanese Spitz. Both of my dogs are about 10 years old now, so they're getting on years. They're basically in their senior years now, and yeah, I mean, both of them have been ill on and off over the last couple of years with allergies, and I don't know, maybe, I don't know if it's tick bites, parasites, and whatever the fuck, I don't know, but they've been in and out of the vets, for mostly allergies. Um, I don't know what's causing it. I don't know if it's something that they've eaten outside in the gate area where we keep dogs. I don't know if it's something in the food. I don't know, but from time to time they have allergy flares up, and we have to go and take them to the vets. Um, or they just get sick for some, I don't know, they just get sick for some reason. Um, and anyway, recently the Japanese Spitz, she was not feeling very well. She had lumps on her back, and she obviously had some kind of an allergic reaction to something. I don't know what it. We don't really know what it was. I don't know if it was some kind of a some liquid or something she's licked somewhere, or if it's something like something in some, because we sometimes buy different foods for them, so we don't know if there's something in the food that she's had an allergic reaction to, or if it's, like I said, it's some kind of a bug, maybe, it's some, I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, she gets it from time to time, as you would expect with any pets that you're going to have. They're obviously going to get ill at some point. That's just inevitable, isn't it? It's just like being a human. It's going to happen at some point. One of them's going to get ill for something or other. It's just unavoidable, I'm afraid. You can do what you can. You can keep them up to date with the vaccines, and try and give them as best food as you can, and keep the skin clean and keep the hair shaven to try and prevent like ticks and bugs and fleas and things like that. But look, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much one person or two, whoever there's only so much you can do as someone that's not a vet. So there comes a point where you have to take your dog or your cats or whatever you've got to the vet, or the vet's got to come to you. So anyway, with that aside, now we're 15 minutes into the video. I want to kind of get into the sort of meat and gravy of this kind of video, really. And that is that I think really in the United Kingdom we do not have very strict powers when it comes to things like getting like warrants, for example. We don't really have very strict enforcement procedures overall, I don't think, with most animal protection societies. And part of the reason for that, basically, is because most of them, as far as I know anyway, most of them are charities. So that in and of itself I think is an issue. And a lot of the charities basically, and I say this as someone who volunteered for the RSPCA back in, I think it was 2013, I think. A lot of the staff are volunteers. A lot of them are, apart from obviously the main, like the vets, vet assistants, but everybody else is just volunteering. People groom, take care of the animals, give them food, and like wash them and wash all the facilities and all that kind of stuff, and prepare everything every day. All that stuff is done by volunteers, and they don't get the credit they deserve. They really work their asses off, quite frankly, and it's a hard job. It's hard work, doing all that kind of stuff. And is it worth it? I mean, it's worth it as far as helping the animals, but but it's a lot of stress, and and it's very demanding, and it can be emotional. It can be emotional being surrounded by, and difficult being surrounded by like animals in distress and in pain, and obviously stressed out because of in cages all day long, and it's not an easy thing to deal with, especially when you're not getting paid for it. So I think, again, I salute those people. They really are. All of the people that are involved in these animal charity organisations, they are, in my opinion, the unsung heroes of most. They're just unsung heroes, and they should really be given a lot more funding than they get, and often they rely on people, big donors and just cut small contributions from the public to fund their businesses. It's expensive. All the medical treatments, all the medical equipment you've got to invest in. That God knows how much you're spending on electricity every day, and air conditioning and lighting and water supplies, cleaning products, and all sorts of just all sorts of different medicines and just everything that's needed. Yeah, it must cost an absolute fortune, and they just don't have enough money. I think ultimately, they just don't get the kind of support. They don't get enough exposure, I don't think, and I think we need to have a lot more focus through advertising, actually, about animal abuse or animal neglect, animal cruelty, about pet ownership. I think we definitely need to become a lot more stricter with those kind of things. So I think that, to the first point I want to make, I guess, the major point I want to make in regards to what I would do here is this. The first thing that I think we need to do in the UK is to have new legislation, new powers for, and first of all, we probably need to establish some kind of an enforcement agency of some sort that animal protection societies can actually can carry out certain duties in a way that basically empowers them to along the lines of police. Basically, they need to have many more powers to essentially, if they need to break into properties, if they have information, have evidence that the animals are in a property that have been abused or neglected, they need to have the ability to be able to forcefully get into a property if necessary, and if necessary, arrest somebody. And whether that means that they can hold that person there until the police arrive, or whether they themselves can take somebody in, I don't know. Maybe that would have to be maybe a relationship with the police. But I definitely think these we need to have an enforcement agency of some sort. And I know that America has, I think, something like that. I think in some states, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the first thing I would do. Secondly, I think what we need to do is we need to have much stronger deterrents. And the reason I say that is because I think that a lot of people who commit animal abuse and animal neglect, they probably partly do it because they think they're going to get away with it. You know, as anyone that does any kind of crime, they think they're going to get away with it, right? Or the sentences are so minuscule that they just don't really care. So that's the second thing that I think we need to have a real serious rethink on. And I would say personally that if you're found guilty of animal neglect, animal abuse and cruelty, I would say that you should have to serve a minimum of, I'd say, at least 20 years, in my opinion. And automatically you're put onto a register in which the public can get access to. The public will know who you are. And you will obviously be banned from ever being allowed to have any pets or being around any other people's pets for the rest of your life. That's what I would do. So I'd say at least 20 years, maybe up to a maximum 40 years in prison. That would be a much, I think, fairer, stricter system, because then you're saying, no, we're not messing around here. This is abhorrent. This is appalling. This is unacceptable. This is immoral, unethical, wrong overall. Just this is wrong. Okay, and we're not going to tolerate this. Okay, we need to have a zero tolerance approach here, where we say, it doesn't matter whether you're a first-time offender or not. You know, whatever the case may be, that you're getting at least 20 years in jail, at least, and you're not going to be getting off. You're not going to be getting out after 10 years. You will absolutely serve a minimum of 20 years. All right, that's it. That's the end of it, basically. And I would say that for repeat offenders, I suppose, I mean, look, if we're talking about cases here where it's someone who's defended themselves against a vicious animal, that's a different thing. But if we're talking about people who've deliberately neglected and abused animals, being just inflicted unnecessary cruelty, whether it's a farm animal, whether it's a pet, whatever it might be, I would say that for first-time offenders, I would say you get 20 years. Right? You have to serve 20 years. No less than that, right? 20 years. Let's say for offenders, I would say that, again, you serve another 20 years. And when you come out, you basically, I would say that you would have to be, I would think that you'd be forced onto some kind of program, basically, where you have to turn up to somewhere every week, for essentially for the rest of your life. You have to turn up to somewhere every week. I don't know what exactly would happen, but it'd be some kind of a strict system where you have to meet at a certain place, maybe it's at a police station or wherever it is. You have to sign something. You have to sign where you're living, what you're doing, and essentially you sign up to some kind of a program where part of the deal is that you will be from time to time under surveillance, and if we catch you with another animal or there's any suspicion that you have animals or you're abusing other animals again, that I would think at that point that should be a life sentence in my opinion. I think that anyone that I mean, if you say you're 50, then or 60, then 20 years is probably going to finish you off anyway. All right, so I would think that essentially there would be either you'd have to go somewhere if you got out of prison, let's say after 20 years, either you would have to go somewhere to meet some kind of requirements or police would come and visit you once a week or something. That's what would happen. And if you fail to be there, you would be, I guess, remanded. Is that the right word? And you'd be brought in, and I'd say 3 strikes, and you're basically arrested again. And then maybe you get a 5-year spell in prison or something. What you've got to do here is say, because it's not just about putting a deterrent there, but it's about prevention as well. I think the way to prevent animal cruelty, first of all, is education. Right, that's another thing that I think is important. We must educate children about these kind of things. That these are real things. These things go on in society, and it's your job to not do that. It's your job to be an upstanding citizen, to protect animals, to defend them, because they can't often defend themselves, okay? And stand up for their rights, okay? And that's what we need. We need more rights for animals on farms. We need more rights for pet. We need more stricter rules for pet ownership as well. But yeah, as far as sentencing goes, I would say that for first-time offenders, you get 20 years, minimum 20 years. And I guess for repeat offenders, if you fail to meet those requirements, strict requirements, weekly requirements every time, more than 3 times, after 3 times, then, and also like I said, you'd be under sporadic surveillance anyway. And if you are caught, then if you do get caught and you have committed more crimes, or you failed to meet the requirements of this programming thing, whatever it was, then you would probably get another, I'd say, 5 years in jail, maybe up to 10, depending on. I mean, if you've actually committed another crime, then I would say get another 20 years in jail, or maybe 30, maybe maximum, maybe a minimum of 30 years, maybe. Whatever the case may be, it would have to be something very serious and very strict, something that tells the public this is not something that's acceptable. This is not something we're going to tolerate. And anyone that thinks that they're going to get away with this, think again, because you won't get away with this. And when we do find you guilty in a court of law with a jury, then you will be serving a prison sentence. You're not going to get a slap on the wrist. You're going to serve an actual sentence, and you're going to commit to it. You're going to fill it out. And whilst you're in prison, you're going to undergo a very severe rehabilitation program, which will include education, psychological and emotional assessments, and you will be forced to explain why you did what you did. And if you can't, and if you show no remorse, then perhaps you get another 5-10 years added to your sentence, maybe something like that. Something very strict, something that just says, we're not having this, okay? You're not going to do this. We're not going to have this in our society. That's it, end of. And I would say for pet ownership, I would say that anyone goes to buy a cat or a dog or any kind of animal, I believe there should be some kind of a mandatory requirement in which those people should have to meet a certain threshold based on some kind of a psychological First of all, criminal history check would have to be absolutely guaranteed, and probably some kind of a psychological and emotional assessment. Now, whether that's done, obviously that probably would have to be done through the NHS or some kind of partnership company with the NHS or something, whatever it was. That's what I would do. That way, you could probably prevent, maybe 20% of what would have been cases of neglect and cruelty, because you're not. It's not some full. It's not some. You can't prevent everything. I'm not going to sit here and be naive and be ignorant, because you can't. You're not going to. You can't prevent everything, all right? No matter what you do, but you can minimize it. You can reduce it, and that's the goal here. And I think in cases where there's been some kind of neglect, perhaps because of some kind of severe illness or some issue, something like that. Maybe it's not outright cruelty, but some kind of neglect of some kind, perhaps because of some disability or some other thing. But maybe then again, that animal would be seized. Those animals would be seized from you, and you would then be banned from having animals. You might not go to jail because it's not quite an abuse case necessarily, but it's neglect. So I feel like I'm not saying that there's going to have to be some degree of you can't just say, well, these people, it's all just bad people doing this. It's not always quite that simple, but if people lack the responsibility and the accountability and the overall, if people are going to be complacent and not going to take care of their dogs or cats or whatever pets they have, or their farm animals, then I'm sorry, but then you will have them seized from you. They will be seized. And quite frankly, if you're running a farm where there's cases of cruelty going on, that either committed by the farmer himself or herself or by his staff, I believe that farm should be shut down. Quite frankly, I think all those people should lose their jobs. That farm should be immediately shut down, and those animals should be confiscated and probably placed into some kind of I don't know, some kind of a sanctuary or something, or somewhere where they're not. I don't think that they should just be confiscated and end up on another farm. In my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying there are always going to be easy solutions here, but we need change. That's for sure. I think anyone that's abusing animals in public, let's say in parks, or maybe like abuse towards pigeons or seagulls or ducks, swans. I would say in those cases that you basically are arrested and you're fined. All right, you might not necessarily serve a life sentence, but I would say that you would. I would suggest that in those cases, people would be put on some kind of a register, and yeah, definitely fined, and probably given a caution. Basically, I mean, if it's not killing an animal, but if it's like kicking an animal or like hurting an animal to the, like. I would say that I would say if someone's caught like kicking an animal, I would say that that person's arrested and brought in for questioning, because you never know whether that person's potentially guilty for something else, or they've done something like this before, or so I think it's best to bring people like that in for questioning personally, to get some kind of an assessment of who they are, and certainly find those people and if nothing else, give them a caution, and then say, the next time that you do this, you will be arrested and you will face, you will be in court, basically. All right, and if you're guilty, you will serve. I'd say for those cases, I'd say maybe 5 to 10 years in jail, maybe. That's what I would say. And again, you might think that's a bit harsh, okay, but I think we need to start being harsh. That's my point with all of this stuff, is we need to be harsh. We need to start getting serious. It's not okay. Let me repeat that. It is not okay to abuse animals. It's not. It's not okay. It's not acceptable. It's wrong. Full stop. All right? That's it. It's wrong. And we need to make sure that is cemented very, very strongly in people's heads, that this is something that we will not tolerate in our society. This is not what we do here. We as best as we can, we protect animals. Okay. Now we might say, well, what about farm animals then? What about cruelty in factory farms and things like that? Well, I would say in those cases that we need a much stronger regulatory bodies around farming overall, whether it's factory, like poultry, like factories and all that kind of stuff, slaughterhouses or farms themselves. Of course, we need to have much better safeguards in place, much better protective mechanisms in place to prevent cruelty, to prevent abuse on farms and out of them, especially in slaughterhouses, where there's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress to meet, daily, quotas of certain, I don't know, whatever it is, whether it's a pig slaughterhouse, a cow slaughterhouse, a chicken slaughterhouse, whatever it might be, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of demand to meet a certain target of what obviously becomes meat every day, and that is a very stressful place. That's a very, very, very highly pressured, very stressful, very psychologically oppressive, emotionally oppressive environment to be in for a lot of people. And I think it's not for everybody. And while I accept that meat is a part of eating meat, I guess to some extent is a part of our way of life, that doesn't mean that we need to be cruel. That doesn't mean that we need to accept abuse. Of course we shouldn't. All animals should be stunned. There shouldn't be any cruelty. There shouldn't be any abuse in slaughterhouses or on farms. Look, I've seen the videos of things like is it PETA? PETA, I think that's what it's called. Look, I've seen. All right, I've seen the horrible shit. All right, I've seen it. I've seen it, and it's horrific. It's horrific. It is horrific, and I don't like any of it, obviously. And so, but I don't think the solution is just to say, well, let's just ban all, let's just never eat meat again. I don't think that's a realistic thing, to be honest with you. As much as I've tried to cut down my meat consumption in the last 10 years. Excuse me. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't reduce. I think we should reduce our consumption of meat. That would be a good start, because that might actually reduce the chances of abuse, cruelty happening. That would be a good place to start, I think. But I don't know whether, in the near term, whether cutting meat completely out of our diets is probably is realistic, and I don't think it probably is. Maybe in the long term, maybe we can possibly do it with more and more lab-grown meat, as they call it. Maybe, I don't know really enough about all that stuff yet, but I would like to see a reduction. Of course, if in an ideal world, we wouldn't have slaughterhouses, we wouldn't have these kind of things, but we do have to eat. We all want to survive, don't we? We all want to live another day, and so you have to eat something. Whether it's something that comes out of the ground, some kind of vegetable or not, or whether it's something that has to be killed. You do have to eat something. And I think, I don't want to see anything suffer, whether it's a. I don't want to see anything suffer. All right, I don't want to. I don't live in a society where we tolerate, where we quietly just accept that cruelty and abuse is just a part of how things work in a slaughterhouse. No. We shouldn't be doing that. We should say, let's accept that we all, like, generally speaking, obviously there's a certain percentage of the society that are vegans and vegetarians. Okay, fine, but for the most part, most people do like to eat meat, right? And with that, the reality of that is that somebody has to kill those animals, right? That's just the reality of it. I wish it wasn't like that, but that's how it is, all right? That's just the reality of it. Somebody has to kill those animals so that you can buy something in your local supermarket, and that's how it is, right? And that's what a lot of these animals are raised for. That's what they're bred for. They're bred to be slaughtered at some point in the coming months, years. So you can have, you have some pork, to have some chicken, to have some beef, to have some lamb or whatever, to have a bit, to have some turkey at Christmas or whatever it might be. And, we can all have that conversation about whether it's ethical or moral or not to do that. But from a practical point of view, it's, we do have to eat, and part of our diet for a very long time has been eating meat. And I'm not saying that should we just do that forever then? Because that's what we've always done. I'm not saying that. But to think that we can just end that overnight, I think is being very naive. And to think that we can purely rely on a vegetarian or vegan diet overall globally in the near future, I think is being very naive. Maybe in the long term, maybe over a couple of decades, perhaps we can start to reduce meat consumption and head to more of a vegetarian diet as lab-grown meat gets better and safer and tastes better. Then yeah, I think maybe more people might start to think, actually, it's just basically tastes the same. It's the same thing. So my hope is that is where we do end up. Because we don't need to have as many slot. I mean, look, people are probably always going to eat meat, all right? We're probably never going to completely end it, but maybe we can dramatically reduce how much of it we and that's not just good for. I think that's better in terms of trying to lead a more ethical and moral life, all right? But it's also better for the environment, I think, in the long term as well, because we know that farming is an extreme contributor to when that's not just with meat, with raising animals, but obviously with crops as well. It's a big burden on the environment. When you think about all the use of fertilizers and all the various products and things, the amount of water that's needed, and all the pollution from farm machinery and factories and all that kind of stuff. So we do need to move we need to change direction, but we have to do it very carefully, I would say. But going back to my point is we need to regulate those things much better. Factories, slaughterhouses, they need to be very, very, very heavily regulated to prevent abuse and cruelty. And probably staff, I think staff, people that are on those conveyor belts, if you like, dealing with what is essentially a very kind of traumatic job, actually, I would say. I would think that for those people, I would say that they should have assessments every few months, I think, because that way you can potentially prevent a lot of issues. And I think the reason some people often take out their suffering, why they often abuse those animals, is because they're under extreme pressure and stress, and obviously it's an extremely dangerous environment to be in as well. And I'm not in any way at all justifying or excusing any abuse or cruelty. Absolutely not. But at the same time, it's unless you've seen those environments, unless you've been in them, I don't think it's fair for us to sit here and assume that they're all some kind of a peaceful, nice place to be. You know, it's not. It's not. It's it. I'm sure it takes its toll on people, and I think the best thing we can do for those staff is to say, well, first of all, what I would say is that I wouldn't have anybody working in your factory that has a criminal record. That's the first thing I would do, because I think that's in my opinion that's just kind of putting animals at risk, especially for people who've been in prison for violent offences or things like that. Absolutely not. I would ban that. I would say that for staff, I would say that there should be monthly assessments to check that people are, are doing okay and not suffering, because a lot of people suffer in those kind of environments. I've watched interviews with people who've been in factory in slaughterhouses, and I can tell you that it's not pleasant. It's not a pleasant place to be, and it does take its toll on people. And unfortunately, for some people, it makes them cold, and it makes them kind of heartless in the end. Actually, not because they are necessarily, but because they almost have to be to do the job. And that in and of itself is a problem, I think, is that when you stop kind of seeing sentient beings as that, you start to see them as a product, and that's where the problems that could creep in, because you're not having the empathy's gone out the window, you see. So I would definitely change legislation around slaughterhouses and rights protections for animals and slaughterhouses, up to the point, that they go to the stunned and whatever. And then I would make sure that all animals are absolutely 100% stunned and unconscious before, essentially they're no easy way to say it, slaughtered. What else can I say? Yeah. So that, I think those are some of the key things I would do personally. And yeah, I would definitely say that for people who are brought in either because they actually have, they've either been found, that they've either been accused of something, or there's some evidence to suggest that they are someone that's been involved in or is actively or has been involved in neglect or abuse. I would bring them in for question, because, like I said before, you don't know whether they've linked to other cases of abuses before, that might have gotten away with for some reason in the past, or potentially they might be involved in other crimes. Could be domestic abuse, child abuse, maybe violent behaviour. Maybe they've assaulted people before. Maybe maybe potentially have killed someone. So you never know. So I always think it's worth investigating those people just in case. And I think what I would also do is I would open up a new kind of a AIDS, like you have humanitarian aid and all that kind of stuff. Well, I would open up a new one, and it would be animal welfare aid, or something like that, basically, where a certain percentage of taxpayers' money would go towards um, funding, whether it's setting up new ones, new charities, or new companies, or whatever it might be, with government backing, government funding, or investment of some sort. Yeah, so some percentage of tax would go towards, 1 or 2% of whatever it is you paid in tax would perhaps go towards that, maybe, or what, 0.5%, I don't know, whatever it would be, something that contributes towards some kind of financial support for these major charities that do most of the work. And I would definitely name and shame the people that have been found guilty for abuse, in the local papers, online, on the radio, whatever. I would make sure that on social media posts. I would have splattered these people's names all over them so everyone knows who they are. Because that's what we should do. We should shame this kind of behaviour. We should make it so that these people are deemed to be horrible people, horrible monsters, which they are. Which a lot of them, most of them are. Yes, there are cases where people genuinely do have mental health conditions like schizophrenia and like major serious issues with depression, things like that. Okay, but even then, it's like it's still wrong. Okay, it's like yes, there are cases when it's not people might not always necessarily meant to do things, but I think for the most part, people genuinely do know what they're doing, and I think in reality, I think what we need to do is to have education campaigns. We need to move towards a world where this is not something that we shy away from. This is not something that happens over there in an industrial state or some rural, some farm and some rural area or somewhere. This is something that we need to face up to, and this is often one of the taboos of society. Really, abuse of animals, neglect is that we know it exists, but we don't want to talk about it. We know it's happening probably maybe even on our street perhaps, or within a few streets away from us, but we don't want to hear about it. Same thing with domestic abuse. Same thing with child abuse. All right, we know that statistically within any given area, there's probably going to be a good chance that at least one person's done something wrong of some sort, committed some kind of a crime. It's just the nature of humanity, unfortunately. So the best thing we can do is prevention is the key here. I think we can't avoid all cases of animal exploitation. And not just on farms, but also in zoos as well. That also needs to be heavily regulated, and also on like beaches where you have donkeys and things like, and obviously horse riding. And I would absolutely completely. I would put severe punishments on people like dog breeding and like severe like dog fighting and all that kind of stuff, and that would be very, very seriously punished. But the key really is to educate people as young as you can, in an appropriate way for that age group, of course. The goal is to say, animals are things to care of, to take care of, to love, to respect, to be responsible for. And if you're not capable of being responsible, then you should give that pet up. And that's something we should tell pet owners is that, if you feel at a given point that you can't deal with the stress of having a pet, because it is stressful at times. If you can't deal with the financial burden, because it is expensive, veterinary care is very expensive. If you can't do that, then there should be some kind of an ability where pet owners can say, "Look, I love my pet, but I just can't do this anymore. I can't take care of it." And if they can't sell that pet for some reason, a family member can't take care of it or something, there should be some maybe there already is some capability where people can just go to the vets, maybe pay a certain amount of money, small amount of money or something, and they give it owner that, and then that owner then is informed of when that pet then is given a new home. Or maybe if maybe they give the owner maybe a certain period of time, maybe they can to kind of get their affairs in order, where the animal institution says, "Okay, we'll give you 3 months or 6 months to try and if you can get you some stuff together by then, you can come back and take care of your pet. But if you can't, we'll have to rehome it." Maybe something like that. I think really what we also need to do is we need to have some community spaces, not just dedicated animal rescue places, but some community places where we could, if there's a dog on the loose in the local area, or there's a cat in pain or something, we can because the animal rescue places, the animal charities are often busy. They're often understaffed, as I mentioned before. They only have so many resources, so many vehicles and things. So maybe we have some kind of community pet sort of organisation, sort of semi-charity thing, maybe volunteer sort of a thing of some sort where animals we can bring animals to temporarily, um, um, instead of just sort of relying purely on these already overly stretched organisations. We need to have other other abilities to take care of stray animals, or animals that are in danger, or animals that are, maybe have been run over by accident, have been hit by a car accidentally, or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I would also say that I think it's important that we try to bring down as best as we can the costs of medical treatments for animals as well, because a lot of the time they are extremely expensive. Um, I think like last time I checked, this was years ago, for like basic vaccines and stuff, you're talking hundreds of pounds. This is a lot of money, and at a time, especially at a time like this, where people's money's already stretched about as far as it can go anywhere. I think we need to have a really serious rethink about the costs of veterinary care, because it's really high, and I accept that things are expensive, and so there should be some government support. The key, I think, really is government support, and the way to do it, I believe, would be through some kind of a tax based approach. That would be the right thing to do here, I think. Um, yeah, I also think that there's a lot of animals get put down every year by these shelters and things like, because they just don't have the capability to take care of them. Unfortunately, there's only so much space, and they're often inundated with more and more animals coming in. Maybe every day, or every other day, every few days, and there's only so much space. There's only so many shelters. There's only so many medicines, vaccines, treatments, staffing, money, space overall, and so the staff have to prioritize what they think is most urgent, and often animals that can't be rehomed for some reason or other, they often get euthanized, and that's a real shame, because not all animals should be euthanized. I don't think it's just that they just haven't found the right owners, and I think there should be some kind of an incentive for people to adopt animals instead of them just being euthanized. I think an animal should be given, I'd say, about a year. I think, and there should be some incentive for people to adopt animals. I don't know whether it's financial, or whether it's some kind of a gifts of vouchers or something, maybe like a year's worth of gift vouchers. I don't know exactly how you do it, but there has to be something that tells people that adopting is a good thing, and it's something we should do to prevent euthanasia, because a lot of animal shelters, charities, they don't want to put dogs and cats down. They don't. That's an absolute last resort. Um, but there's just nothing. Often, not a lot they can do. There's not much they can really do about it a lot of the time, and that's a real shame. I think what we do need to have is to have hotlines, support hotlines for reporting abuse or neglect anonymously. And I think that, personally, I think that should automatically trigger a police response, in my opinion. I don't think it should just purely be that the animal services, charities, whatever, that they have to respond to it. I think it should also be a matter for the police as well. As I've already mentioned, campaigns. I think that's definitely a way forward. Um, bringing down costs would perhaps make it easier for some people to take care of their animals, because they wouldn't feel that they'd have to neglect them, or give them up, or essentially abandon them. It to me, I I just I don't really understand that though. It's like, I mean, if you're in such a terrible mess financially, the best thing is just to take your pet to your local animal charity. I would say. Maybe we need some kind of a foster care program, some kind of a temporary animal shelter home. Um, if the essentially for these bigger charities to offload them to, so that they've got plenty of space to bring in animals that are urgently in need, and not just sitting there essentially just sort of like taking up space really. So there should be a dedicated place for animals to be when if they're not in urgent need of or in an emergency situation of care. So I think it's important that they would be placed somewhere where a dedicated team, whether it's volunteers, whether it's a paid thing, or I don't know exactly, but something where they can stay until maybe the RSPCA or the PDSA or whoever it is, they check on them regularly to see how they're doing, make sure there's no health issues or health concerns. Yeah, I think that would probably be a good idea. Um, I'm just having a look at my list here of things I've got written down. Just give me a second. Yeah, and like I said before, I think once people have been found guilty of these things, um, I think that these people should be on a register and should be in some kind of a national, yeah, national register database type thing where they're very much the authorities are very much aware of who they are, not just the animal protection services but the police as well. They would know who they are, and potentially can prevent these people from committing abuse again. Um, but as far as like fines are concerned, I would make it so that if you've been accused of a crime that's not like outright torture, or it's just like, yeah, outright cruelty, like in the extremes, but it's like it's neglect or some kind of abuse of some sort, but it's not like extreme of any kind. But it's obviously not that any of it's good, obviously. But I would say that anyone that is fined, you would have to pay back. I'd say something like £30,000 or something. At least I'd say that's what you'd be fined. And if you can't pay it, and if you fail to pay it, you'll be imprisoned. Again, another deterrent. Um, and what you need, like what I think you do need, is to have surveillance. I think what should happen, quite frankly, is that everyone who registers for a pet should sign up to a mandatory um, 3 to 6 month check, and if you fail to show up at that place where that pet's registered, then they will come to your house. And if you fail to report, if you fail to be there, then after a couple of weeks you get a letter, and if you refuse to respond to that letter, then the authorities then have rights to have come with more, to enact more powers, and eventually maybe after 3 months or something like that, the police would then get involved. That's what I would personally do. Again, what you've got to do is keep people on the feet and keep people um, in a place, basically. Saying this is what comes with ownership of a pet, and you are going to take care of it. And you are going to abide by the system, by the rules, because this is the system is there for a reason. It's there to protect those animals, and if we feel that you're not protecting those animals, then you will know about it. And if necessary, again, and if you let's say that happens more than twice, two or three times, let's say, then I would say that at that point, you've basically broken the contract. And maybe that's what you need. There needs to be an actual contract in which you sign, when a proper contract with all of the rules and regulations, details, and potential consequences of you failing to report, failing to take care of your animal, failing to show up at regular check-ins every 3 to 6 months at your local RSPCA or whatever it is. And essentially, if you don't do that, then these authorities, this enforcement section of the animal charity or whatever it is, security type of kind of thing, outfit, they would come in with more enforcement. Essentially, that they would have more rights and powers to do what they feel is necessary, because that's what's written into the contract. And that way, you build into the system a strong sense of, I've got to actually be responsible here. I've got to actually be an owner. I've got to actually take accountability for my animals. And that's the way to do it. It's about punishing people necessarily. It's about being strict. It's about getting serious and strict about this thing. That, in my opinion, for far too long, we've let go out of control. It's funny how I make this video with a dog bark in the background, and that's another thing I would also disallow. By the way, I would prevent that kind of thing happening, where dogs are just allowed to just bark all day long, every day. I would say in those cases where people report those owners, I would say that basically that those owners are forced to put, if that dog is going to be kept outside, it has to have a muzzle on. Or if you don't keep a muzzle on it, if it's inside your gate area, whatever it is, you keep it to stop it from barking, basically, then you would have to keep it in the house. And if you refuse to do that, then you'll just have the pet will be seized from you, because you've got to have a line. You've got to have boundaries. You've got to say, look, you're not just going to do whatever the hell you want. Okay, you're not going to do that. We make the rules here because these rules are the rules that help animals, and that's our job. Our job is to help animals. Your job is to respect that. Okay, if you want to have a pet, fine, no problem. But you're going to respect the authorities. You're going to respect what we decide is best for the animals, because we're trying to do something right. We're trying to do something ethical and moral, and we want you to be a part of that because it's the right thing to do. And if you don't want to do that, then you should be disqualified for having animals then, because you don't respect that. Okay. So that means having new powers for confiscation, to seize animals on the spot if necessary. If someone's being abusive towards their dog in public, then I think there should be some kind of an ability for police or this enforcement security type thing to be called, maybe anonymously, tell them where they are, and they can track you via GPS. Maybe there's an app on your phone or something you can have, and then you can essentially know where they are and how long they're going to be before they get to you. And yeah, you can take a picture and report people. So I don't want to kind of make it into some kind of society of everyone sort of grassing on each other, or some kind of a paranoid community type thing or something. And that's not what I want to do here. But I do think we need to start saying, let's look out for one another, shall we? Let's try and be decent, and let's report things that we know are not decent, that we know are wrong, that we know are unnecessary, and we can prevent or potentially prevent. So this needs to come down to new legislation through Parliament. It needs to come down to a complete rethink on animal ownership, new regulatory bodies, the use of councils, new community sort of centre type things, I think. Probably new sort of funding investments. Education, as I mentioned a few times. And probably also, I would say that actually, what I would also argue for is pet ownership that comes that what I would say is if you plan to have a pet for the first time, or maybe it's just any time you have a pet, you now have to have a license. Basically, that's what I think would be a good idea. You have to have a license to have a pet, and as part of getting that license, you have to go through some training. You have to meet the requirements, as I said, about the assessment, psychological, criminal history check, and all that kind of stuff. That's all absolutely necessary. And also mandatory reporting laws as well. That would be a good idea. So where neighbours, teachers, NHS staff maybe as well, local leaders, whoever, can report things, can report potential abuses going on. As far as the ownership thing, I would say that training would have to be part, and if you don't pass that training, that would be necessary to get your license. Then you're not allowed, and then you would then have to wait another year before you'd be allowed to get it again. So I would be very strict with all this stuff. It would be firm but fair, strict, very strict, because I think we have to be strict. Because if you want to improve the chances of reducing or preventing abuse and neglect, you need to set new deterrents, stricter deterrents, a zero tolerance atmosphere around all of this stuff. And I think that's pretty much it, really. Yeah, and also probably microchipping as well. That mandatory microchipping. That's what I would say with registration, so that that animal can always be tracked. Always. That would be a really good thing. And if that how that would work, I don't know exactly, but like that would probably be a good idea. And also one other thing that I would personally do is I would ban pet shops. And what I mean by that is I would ban these shops where you've got snakes stuffed into long, big snakes that are used to, open spaces reduced to, the size of a shoebox, basically, essentially, which is obviously wrong, right? And the same thing for lizards, and birds as well. Personally, I would ban all that stuff. I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't allow that. I don't think that's right. I really don't. And actually, do you know what? Honestly, I think I would outright ban people having snakes. I don't think people should be allowed to have snakes. I think any kind of exotic animals, really, apart from maybe some like parrots and birds. Maybe if you've got, as long as you allow them to fly around your house. But like the problem is, people often keep them in cages all day long, and I don't think this is the way that we should do things. I really don't. I think we should say those kind of exotic animals should only be allowed to be in zoos where there's a place where they've got plenty of enclosures, they've got plenty of space to roam around. Because I don't think it's right that we should accept. Well, first of all, people can be very cruel with things like snakes and things, and mice, and feeding mice to their snakes and while they're alive and all that. I've seen it on YouTube. You get these vile. I'm not going to waste my breath on them. Basically, people that are just cruel to animals. Whether it's keeping big fish in small tanks, and like keeping snakes in very small places and stuff like that. To me, that's wrong. I think that's cruel, and I personally wouldn't. If you've got a big space to keep them, and again, all of this would you do before you would be allowed to even take the pet home with you. I've mentioned all the things already, but I would think that there should be a legal requirement for the RSPCA or the PDSA, whoever it is that's some kind of authority over all this stuff would be able to say that, well, if you're going to have a lizard or a snake, then we need to know where it's going to be kept. and you're going to keep us up to date with that, where that animal is kept. Because if you keep it in a smaller place than the requirements that we set for it, that animal will be confiscated. And this is the way that you make things better for animals. It's not about being punitive. It's not about being overly harsh. It's about setting a standard. It's about saying, we don't want to be strict, but we have to be. Because we all know what happens when we're not strict. When we let shit slide, basically, right? When we let people get off with things, get away with things, because it's easier, right? Because it's more convenient, let's say, for some people, because they have to fill out loads of forms stuff. No, we need to get away from that. We need to get back to a system where we say, we are a country of pet ownership, and that's a wonderful thing. But this is the standard that we want you to meet. And if you're willing to meet that standard, absolutely fine. We don't have a problem with that. We want you to have pets. We want people to take care of pets. It's good for your mental health. It's good for you it's good for loneliness, I suppose, as well, right? It's good to have something to come back home to, especially as you get older. But we need to know that you're competent enough, and you're capable enough, and that you're, quite frankly, caring enough to want to commit to the responsibilities and sometimes stressful periods that come with owning pets. That doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a cat, whether it's a gerbil, whether it's a mouse, whether it's a horse, whether it's an elephant, whether it's a cow, pigs, whatever it might be. At the end of the day, we need to know that you can do it, and that you're going to do it to the best of your ability. And if you can't, or we feel that you're not able to do that, then we have to do what we feel is necessary. And it's not because we're trying to be cruel. It's because we're trying to prevent cruelty. All right, that's the aim. We don't want to live in a surveillance society. But if we are to prevent or to bring down cruelty and abuse by a certain percentage, then we need to change tactics, because that's the only way we can do this. And that's basically really all I have to say about it, really. I think I've kind of run through most of the key points, really. So I hope you've found this video quite interesting. Maybe you've got some pets of your own. Let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, I'll see you on the next video, I guess. Thank you very much for watching and listening. See you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.